Hi everyone, my name is Arthur, and I never thought I'd find myself writing about this. After 37 years of what I believed to be a happy, stable marriage, my life unraveled in the most unimaginable way. If you're reading this, let me warn you, what I'm about to share might leave you as speechless as it left me. My wife Evelyn and I had been married since our early 20s. We built a life together, a house in a suburb of Atlanta, 2 wonderful kids, countless memories. I thought I knew her better than anyone else in the world. She was my rock, my partner, the love of my life, or so I believed. That's what makes this story so hard to tell. It all started one evening after we'd finished dinner. Nothing fancy, just one of those quiet nights you come to cherish after decades together. Evelyn had been acting a little off all day, but I didn't press her about it. I figured she was tired or maybe upset about something trivial. After dinner, she insisted we sit down in the living room. That was unusual for her. Normally she'd be cleaning up the dishes while chatting about her day or reminding me about something we needed to do over the weekend. But this time, she sat across from me, wringing her hands. "Arthur," she started, her voice soft but strained. "I need to talk to you." My stomach nodded. Her tone wasn't casual. It was serious, almost ominous. I tried to stay calm, brushing off the growing sense of dread creeping up my spine. "What is it?" I asked, leaning forward. She hesitated, looking down at her lap before finally meeting my eyes. "There's something I need to tell you, something I've kept from you for a long time." That caught me off guard. Evelyn wasn't the type to keep secrets, or so I thought. We'd always prided ourselves on honesty. What could she possibly be hiding after all these years? "You're scaring me, Evelyn," I said, trying to inject some levity into the moment, though my heart was already racing. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath and looked away, as if she couldn't face me while saying what came next. "Do you remember our old neighbor, Martin?" I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden mention of someone from our distant past. Martin was a financial consultant and had been our next-door neighbor decades ago when we'd first moved into our house. He was a friendly enough guy, always polite, always smiling, but I hadn't thought about him in years. "Yeah, I remember him," I said slowly. "What about him?" Evelyn's hands trembled as she clasped them together tightly. Her voice wavered. "Well, there's something I never told you about him." A pit formed in my stomach. The room seemed to grow quieter, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I couldn't bring myself to speak. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. And then she said it. "Back then, when you were working those long hours as an architect, Martin and I, we had an affair." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, echoing in my ears. At first, I thought I must have misheard her. I shook my head slightly, as if trying to clear the fog that suddenly clouded my thoughts. "What?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away this time. "I'm so sorry, Arthur. It happened so long ago, and I've regretted it every day since. But I can't keep it from you any longer." I sat there, frozen. My mind was racing, but I couldn't seem to form a coherent thought. An affair? With Martin? All those years ago? How could she have kept this from me for so long? And why tell me now? I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there in stunned silence. My world, the life I'd built with her, felt like it was crumbling around me, and that was only the beginning. I sat there, completely stunned as Evelyn's words echoed in my mind. We had an affair. Couldn't believe it. After 37 years of marriage, this was the moment she chose to confess. Decades of trust, loyalty, and love shattered in an instant. My body felt numb, but my mind was racing with questions I couldn't yet form into words. Finally, I managed to break the silence. My voice was cold, unfamiliar even to me. "Why now, Evelyn? Why are you telling me this after all these years? What made you think I needed to know this tonight?" She wiped at her eyes, her hands trembling. I couldn't keep it in anymore, Arthur. It's been eating me alive. You deserve to know the truth, and I couldn't live with the guilt any longer. Guilt. That's what this was about. Her guilt. I felt a surge of anger building in my chest. She wasn't confessing out of love or respect for me. This was about her trying to free herself from the burden she'd been carrying all these years. And what about me? What about the burden she just dropped on me like a bomb? I stood up, unable to sit still, pacing the room. I clenched and unclenched my fists, trying to keep my emotions in check. My thoughts were all over the place. Why had she done it? How long had it lasted? Did anyone else know? But one question kept pushing its way to the front of my mind. Did you love him? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Evelyn flinched as if the question had physically struck her. She shook her head quickly. No, Arthur, I didn't. It was a mistake. I was lonely, and you were working so much back then. It wasn't love. It was stupid and selfish. I turned to face her, my anger bubbling to the surface. A mistake? You don't accidentally trip and fall into someone else's bed. Evelyn, don't you dare stand there and call it a mistake. You made a choice. Her tears were flowing freely now, but I wasn't moved by them. Not this time. For once, I didn't care about how she felt. I wanted answers. How long did it last? I demanded, my voice sharper now. Evelyn hesitated, looking at the floor. A few months, she admitted quietly. A few months, I repeated, incredulous. And all that time you came home to me, looked me in the eye, and pretended like nothing was wrong? Like everything was fine. She nodded, her sobs choking her words. I hated myself for it, Arthur. I really did. And after it ended, I swore I'd never hurt you like that again. I've been faithful ever since, I promise. Her promises meant nothing to me in that moment. How could I believe anything she said after this? The trust we built over nearly 4 decades was gone, replaced by a gaping hole I didn't know how to fill. I needed to get out of there to clear my head. The walls of the living room felt like they were closing in on me. Grabbing my coat, I headed for the door. Where are you going? Evelyn asked, panic in her voice. I don't know, I said flatly. But I can't be here right now. I didn't have a destination in mind as I walked out into the cold night air. My feet moved on autopilot, leading me through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. Memories of our life together flooded my mind, unbidden and relentless. I thought about the day we bought our house. It was small and needed work, but Evelyn, a teacher, had fallen in love with it instantly. We spent years turning it into a home, painting walls, planting a garden, and filling it with laughter. I remembered the nights we stayed up late, talking about our dreams for the future. I remembered the way she looked at me on our wedding day, like I was the only man in the world. And now all of that felt like a lie. My aimless walk eventually brought me to the park where Evelyn and I used to bring the kids when they were little. The swings creaked in the breeze, and the empty benches looked lonely under the dim glow of the streetlights. I sat down, burying my face in my hands. What was I supposed to do now? How do you even begin to process something like this? My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. I pulled it out and saw Evelyn's name on the screen. I ignored the call, but it buzzed again a few seconds later. This time I answered, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. What do you want, Evelyn? Her voice was shaky, barely audible. Please come home, Arthur. Need to talk. I wanted to scream at her to tell her that talking wasn't going to fix this, but a part of me, maybe the part that still loved her, wanted answers. I wanted to know why she'd done it, how she could have betrayed me like that, and why she thought confessing now would somehow make things better. Fine, I said, hanging up before she could respond. As I walked back home, I felt like I was heading toward an unknown battle. I had no idea where this conversation would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. Life as I knew it would never be the same again. By the time I walked back into the house, the cold night air had done little to cool the storm brewing inside me. Evelyn was waiting in the living room, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like a stranger to me, a woman I thought I knew better than anyone, now unrecognizable. I'm here, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Talk. She flinched at my words but nodded. Arthur, I know I've hurt you. I can't take back what I did, but I want to explain. Explain what? I cut her off, my voice rising. Explain how you decided to betray me while I was working my ass off to provide for our family? Explain why you've spent decades lying to my face. Evelyn's tears started again, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her emotions distract me from the pain she'd caused. I sat down across from her, glaring, waiting for her to say something that could make any of this make sense. I was lonely, she said finally, her voice trembling. You were always working late. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore, and Martin, he was there. He noticed me. I shook my head, disgusted. So what? You weren't getting enough attention, and you decided that jumping into bed with the neighbor was the solution. It wasn't like that, she protested. It wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated mockingly. You keep calling it a mistake, Evelyn, but mistakes don't last for months. That was a choice, a series of choices. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. She fell silent, her head hanging low. For a moment, I thought she might finally admit that I was right, that there was no excuse for what she'd done. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. I ended it because I found out he was seeing someone else, she whispered. My heart stopped. What? She looked up at me, her face pale. Martin, he wasn't faithful to me either. I thought I meant something to him, but I was just another fling. That's why I ended it. Her words hit me like a second betrayal. Not only had she cheated on me, but she'd ended the affair not out of guilt or love for me, but because the other man had betrayed her. The irony was sickening. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You didn't stop because you realized it was wrong. You stopped because he moved on to someone else. Do you have any idea how that sounds? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I was stupid, Arthur. I was selfish and stupid, and I ruined everything. Her confession didn't bring me any relief. If anything, it only made me angrier. How many years had I spent believing we had a perfect marriage only to find out it was built on lies? How many times had I defended her, trusted her, loved her, while she kept this secret? I gave you everything, Evelyn, I said, my voice breaking. I gave you my loyalty, my love, my whole life. And this is how you repay me? I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'll do anything to make this right. But how could she make this right? There was no going back, no undoing the damage she'd done. The trust we built over 37 years was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness I didn't know how to fill. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, standing up. And honestly, I don't think I want to. Please, Arthur, she begged, reaching out for me. Don't walk away. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I laughed bitterly. You think sitting in a room with a stranger is going to erase what you did? This isn't some rough patch, Evelyn. This is a betrayal of everything we built together. I turned away, heading for the stairs. I couldn't look at her anymore. Every second in her presence felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Where are you going? She asked, her voice trembling. To bed, I said flatly. And tomorrow, I'm going to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do next. As I climbed the stairs, her sobs echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about her tears. The next morning, I woke up to an eerie silence. Evelyn wasn't in the bedroom, and for a brief, blissful moment, I forgot everything that had happened the night before. But reality came crashing back the second I walked downstairs and saw her sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes puffy and red. Morning, she said softly, her voice hoarse. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the far end of the table, as far away from her as possible. Arthur, please. We need to talk. I sighed, taking a sip of coffee before setting the mug down. Fine. Talk. She took a deep breath as if trying to summon the courage to continue. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes. I love you, Arthur. Her words felt hollow, empty. Love. How could she claim to love me after what she'd done? Love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. You don't get to throw that word around, Evelyn, I said coldly. Not after what you've done. She flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, sliding it across the table toward me. I hesitated before picking it up. It was a letter, handwritten, from Martin. I looked up at her, confused. What is this? It's a letter he sent me right before he moved away, she explained. I never told you about it, but maybe it'll help you understand. I stared at the letter, debating whether I even wanted to read it. Did I really want to know more about her betrayal? But curiosity and maybe a desire for closure got the better of me. I unfolded the paper and began to read. The letter was short, too short for something that had played such a devastating role in my life. I scanned the neat handwriting, each word pulling me deeper into a storm of emotions. Dear Evelyn, I wanted to thank you for the time we shared. I know what we had wasn't right, and I know we both carry the guilt of what we did. You're a wonderful woman, but I can't stay here any longer. I've met someone and I need to move on with my life. I hope you can too. Take care of yourself, Martin. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity, my hands trembling as I folded it back up. My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and something I couldn't quite place. Maybe sadness for the person I thought Evelyn was. That's it, I asked, my voice flat. That's the man you threw away our marriage for? Someone who couldn't even bother to apologize properly. Evelyn looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. I wasn't thinking straight, Arthur. I was stupid and vulnerable, and I let myself believe he cared about me. You believed he cared about you? I repeated, my voice rising. What about me, Evelyn? Did you even think about me while this was happening? Or was I just an afterthought? She looked up then, tears streaming down her face. I thought about you every day. That's why I ended it, Arthur. I realized what I had done and I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. You ended it because he left you. I shot back. Don't try to rewrite history now. The only reason you stopped was because he moved on. Let's not pretend it was about saving our marriage. Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, sobbing. But her tears didn't move me, not anymore. I sat at the lake for what felt like an eternity, staring out at the still water as the sun climbed higher into the sky. The serenity of the scene felt like a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside me. Every memory I'd built with Evelyn over the last 37 years replayed in my mind. But now they were tainted, painted in shades of doubt and betrayal. How many other secrets had she kept from me? Was Martin the only one? Could there have been others? The thought made my stomach churn. The worst part of it all was the timeline. 37 years of marriage, and for most of those years, I had no idea this betrayal existed. How do you process something like that? How do you reconcile the person you thought you knew with the stranger they've suddenly become? I thought back to the early days of our marriage. We were so young then, so full of hope. I remembered the way Evelyn looked on our wedding day, her smile, the way her eyes sparkled. I'd been so sure she was my soulmate, the one person in the world who would never hurt me. And now, all these years later, she had become the source of my deepest pain. As I sat there, I began to question everything. Had she truly been happy with me, or had she stayed out of obligation, out of guilt, out of fear of being alone? And what about me? Could I even forgive her? Did I want to? Forgiveness. The word felt heavy, almost impossible. Forgiving her would mean letting go of my anger, my pain, my sense of betrayal. But wasn't forgiveness also supposed to be for me, to free me from the burden of carrying this hurt? It sounded good in theory, but in practice it felt like a betrayal of myself. A sudden memory hit me like a punch to the gut. It was from years ago, during the time she must have been involved with Martin. I remembered coming home late one night after a long shift at work. Evelyn had been unusually cheerful, greeting me with a warm meal and an even warmer smile. At the time, I thought it was just her being her, kind, loving, devoted. But now I couldn't help but wonder. Had she been overcompensating? Was she trying to hide her guilt? The questions were endless, and the answers felt unreachable. I was trapped in a loop, reliving every moment of our marriage through this new, painful lens. Eventually, I stood up and made my way back to the car. I didn't feel any better. I wasn't even sure I felt anything at all. But I knew I couldn't sit there forever. I had to face her again, had to figure out what came next. The drive home to our house in Austin, Texas was quiet. The hum of the engine, the only sound breaking the silence. My mind was still racing, but I forced myself to focus on the road. I needed to get through this one step at a time, even if I didn't know what the next step would be. When I walked back into the house, the atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. Evelyn was still in the living room, sitting on the couch with her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Arthur," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you're back. I was so scared you wouldn't come home." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took off my coat and sat down in the armchair across from her, keeping a deliberate distance between us. "I came back," I said finally, "but I don't know if I'm staying." Her face crumpled at my words, and fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please, Arthur, don't say that. I know I've hurt you, but I'm begging you to give me a chance to make things right." I let out a bitter laugh. "Make things right? How exactly do you plan to do that? Evelyn, can you undo the affair? Can you erase the years of lies and deceit? Because unless you've figured out how to turn back time, I don't see how you can make things right." She flinched at my words, but I didn't regret saying them. She needed to understand the depth of the damage she'd done. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," she said, her voice trembling. I just want a chance to prove to you that I still love you. That I've always loved you." "Always loved me?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Do you even hear yourself, Evelyn? You're trying to tell me you loved me while you were sneaking around with another man. How does that work?" She didn't have an answer, of course. She just sat there, sobbing quietly while I stared at her, my heart heavy with anger and grief. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the letter, the cold, impersonal letter Martin had written her, and any sympathy I might have felt disappeared. "I need time," I said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I can't make any decisions right now. I need to think." "Take all the time you need," she said quickly, her voice desperate. "I'll do whatever it takes, Arthur. Just please don't leave me." I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for so many years and stared at the floor. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear. Our marriage would never be the same. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day in my mind. Evelyn was downstairs, and the silence between us felt like a physical barrier. I didn't know if we could rebuild what had been broken, or if it was even worth trying. All I knew was that I couldn't live like this, trapped in a marriage filled with pain and resentment. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I made a decision. I needed to take control of my life again. Whether that meant fighting for our marriage or walking away for good, I wasn't sure yet. But one way or another, I was going to find a way to move forward. I got out of bed and began packing a bag. It wasn't much, just enough clothes for a few days and some essentials. When I went downstairs, Evelyn was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. "Arthur," she said, her voice tentative. "What are you doing?" "I need space," I said simply. "I'm going to stay at a hotel for a few days. I need time to think." Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. "I understand," she said quietly. "Just please come back. I'll be here waiting for you." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, unsure of what the future held, but determined to find some kind of peace, whether it was with her or without her. As a reader diving into Arthur's heartbreaking story, it's hard not to feel a mix of sympathy, frustration, and reflection. This tale of a 37-year marriage shattered by a long-buried affair with the neighbor Martin really hits home on how fragile trust can be. From my perspective, what happened here boils down to a combination of unmet emotional needs, poor communication, and a lack of accountability that festered over decades. Evelyn felt lonely during Arthur's long work hours as an architect, and instead of addressing that directly with him, she sought validation from Martin, who was conveniently around and attentive. It wasn't just a one-off mistake. It lasted months, showing a pattern of selfish choices driven by her vulnerability and perhaps a midlife dissatisfaction. Arthur, on the other hand, was so focused on providing for the family that he might have overlooked her emotional signals, assuming everything was fine because the surface looked stable. Why did this explode now, after all these years? Evelyn's guilt finally caught up, but it seems more about unburdening herself than truly considering Arthur's well-being. Timing it during a quiet evening without any external trigger suggests it was her internal breaking point, not a mutual one. One big lesson here is the danger of letting small cracks in a relationship grow into canyons. Marriages aren't static. They need ongoing effort, and ignoring emotional distance can lead to disasters like this. It's a reminder that infidelity often stems from deeper issues like resentment or neglect, not just attraction to someone else. Recognizing toxic relationships early could have helped. Though this one wasn't overtly toxic until the reveal, the underlying dynamics were unhealthy. For instance, if one partner feels invisible and the other is oblivious, that's a breeding ground for resentment. Toxic elements show up when communication breaks down, leading to secrets and lies that poison the foundation over time. Looking back, there were red flags and warning signals that Arthur probably didn't notice because he was in the thick of building a life and trusted Evelyn completely. Her acting a little off on the day of the confession was a subtle cue, but hindsight shows more. During the affair years ago, she might have been overly cheerful or compensatory at times, like the memory Arthur recalls of her greeting him warmly after a late night. That could have been guilt masking as affection. Broader warning signs include one partner's sudden changes in behavior, like increased secrecy, emotional withdrawal, or unexplained mood swings. Arthur mentions Evelyn wringing her hands and hesitating, which are classic signs of someone about to drop a bomb, but he brushed off her off day as tiredness. In long-term relationships, we often normalize these because of familiarity, but they're signals that something's brewing. Another red flag is the lack of open check-ins. They prided themselves on honesty, but clearly, it wasn't deep enough if she hid this for decades. If Arthur had noticed her loneliness back then and initiated conversations about work-life balance, maybe it could have been prevented. Self-respect plays a huge role in all this, and it's painfully clear how important it is. Arthur's initial reaction, feeling numb, then angry, and finally seeking space, shows he's starting to reclaim his self-worth. For too long, he poured everything into the marriage without questioning if it was reciprocal. Self-respect means not accepting betrayal as just a mistake and setting boundaries, like when he walked out or demanded answers. Without it, people stay in hurtful situations out of fear or habit. But Arthur's decision to pack a bag and get a hotel room is a step toward valuing himself over a broken status quo. It teaches that self-respect isn't selfish. It's essential for healing and deciding if forgiveness is even possible. As for advice on recovering after betrayal, first, give yourself time and space like Arthur did. Don't rush decisions in the heat of emotion. Seek professional help. He dismissed counseling at first, but it could provide tools to process the pain, whether rebuilding or separating. Surround yourself with support. Talk to friends, family, or a therapist to avoid isolating like Arthur did on his walks. Rebuild your identity outside the relationship. Arthur's reflections on memories show how intertwined he was with Evelyn, so focusing on hobbies, work, or personal goals can help regain independence. Finally, forgiveness is optional and shouldn't be forced. It's for your peace, not theirs. If staying, it requires real change from the betrayer, like full transparency and effort, but if not, walking away can lead to a healthier life. This story is a tough wake-up call that even perfect marriages can hide cracks, but recognizing them early and prioritizing self-respect can prevent or heal the fallout.